Hey everyone, this is Tracy Friedlander. You're listening to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. On the show today, I have author, artist, and music festival founder Carrie Knowles. Carrie is a good friend of mine and a previous popular guest on the podcast. This time she's on the show to talk about her latest project, a brand new book that is out now, a fictional novel but based on real-life experiences of founding Cross Currents Chamber Festival in North Carolina, a program she ran for 5 years. Today we talk about what goes into creating a festival from scratch, the future of classical music, which I believe is small self-started projects, and she gives super valuable pieces of advice you need to hear if you've ever considered starting a music festival. But before we get started, there's a couple of quick things I want you to know about. So many people are doubling down on their teaching businesses this year. Is that you? Are you thinking about how you could make more money? Maybe even attract more of your ideal students? And wouldn't it be nice if you could actually do that without spending more one-on-one time teaching private lessons, trading hours for dollars? You might even be wondering if that's even possible. If these ideas intrigue you, I want you to know about my new free report, Get More Students, Attract Top Quality Students that are a joy to work with and pay you top dollar. This report will show you how you can make more money, have more time, find your ideal student, and actually build a studio you love. The link to download the report is in the show notes. And by the way, this report is for you whether you have a full studio already or you're starting from scratch, whether you're teaching lessons or looking to attract students or clients to offer them something different in your area of expertise. In addition to that, I also want you to know about a really cool payment and scheduling platform you need to know that can transform the way you schedule your lessons and collect payments. Fons is a company co-founded by a friend of mine, and he's a guitarist, Eric Branner. He was also a guest on Crushing Classical. And Fons streamlines the entire business and admin side of lessons, from scheduling to payments to integrating Zoom into your calendar like everyone is doing now. Fons takes care of it all. When you use Fons, scheduling becomes a breeze. Students get email reminders. They always know the Zoom link. And no more chasing after payments. Everything comes through on one platform and results in a direct deposit to you. If you'd like to try Fons now, for a limited time, you can try it for 15 days free. And if you decide to move your business over to the platform, we both get $100. That's right, they'll credit you $100 if you stick with it. Use my link in the show notes to get that deal. Let's get started. We're going to drop the needle on this awesome conversation. Carrie, I'm so happy to have you back here.
Well, I am so happy to be in Mexico with you.
Yes. And it's so funny because when we first had our first conversation, I was like, well, Carrie's a writer. You're also an artist. You have musician children. So, it is related to Crushing Classical, but you're not a musician, but that's okay. We're going to have an awesome conversation because we're good friends. And what happened next is your episode skyrocketed. It's always in the top 10. And
so wonderful.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of continue the conversation because Carrie, one of the things we talked about on our first episode was how you started a music festival in Raleigh. We touched on it on your last episode and how dramatic it is, how many moving parts there are. And so you're coming back on the show today because you wrote a fiction novel, which I read, which is fabulous. And it comes out like in a week. And it's loosely based on your experience doing that. But tell us a little bit more about this book, this creative project. We're going to talk all about creative projects and evolutions and everything today. But I want to start with the book because the book, I have to admit to you, I don't really read that much fiction because I'm a nonfiction kind of glutton. I have a stack of self-help and improvement and mindset stuff, Eckhart Tolle, Dr. Joe Dispenza. That's what's on my nightstand. I'm just always thinking about how to improve myself. And so I tend to get drawn to nonfiction. But when you you didn't release the book yet, but you let me read it so I could give you my blurb. for the beginning of the book, I was like, okay, fiction. I don't do fiction that much. I'm going to start reading it. Once I got into it, I was absolutely hooked. And there was a moment where I was like, guys, to my family, go out, do something. I need to finish this book. I need to know what happens.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that all work that we do that has any kind of passion, any kind of fire to it, comes from our own lives,
Mhm.
And I think when you hear sometimes music that a young composer has created, or music that Bach wrote, or, that it just has a fire to it, that fire comes from a personal experience, a belief, or whatever, a tragedy, a tragic comedy like running a music festival, or that jumping off a cliff. And yes, I do have some musical children, and one of them is Neil Leiter, who has started. He's classically trained, and he is now on his own. You've done a podcast with him about the Echo Collective, and he's kind of created a new path for himself. But before he did that, he was with the Brussels Chamber Orchestra, and he's a smart businessman. And he came to me, and I had done a lot of different things as an artist and as a writer, and I had started the Boylan Heights Art Walk and ran it for 17 years, only because somebody came to my door. Phil Pratt came to my door with, he was this very quiet guy, and he was a woodworker and was a cabinet builder, and he decided to start turning wood. And he was this very shy guy. And my office used to be in our home in Boylan Heights, and upstairs. And I hear a knock on the door one afternoon, and I walk down, and there's Phil Pratt, and he's holding two wooden bowls. And I said, "Hey, Phil, he said, "You have to help me." And I said, help you do what?" And he said, "I made these." And I said, "Well, they're beautiful." And he said, "I want to sell them." And I said, "Well, how much are they?" He said, No. I want you to help me sell all of them. These are just two of them." And so from that conversation, I decided to build the Art Walk, which started with 5 artists, including Phil. And very quickly it grew to 125 artists, and it became a yearly event, and I ran it for 17 years. And the same similar thing happened with our son. He came to me and he said, "Well, you did the Art Walk, and that was amazing, and you've often been a mentor to writers." And he said, "I had this idea for a music festival. Would you bring the Brussels Chamber Orchestra to Raleigh?" And I foolishly said, "Sure, we can do that together." And, it was interesting. All of a sudden, when you do, I've always said that everything that you do builds on itself to make you a better artist, a better writer, a better person. There's no job you've ever had that you haven't carried with you, and there's no thing that you've done, that hasn't impacted who you are and how you express yourself in the world. And, I think an artist or a musician, just let's use the term artist in general to be dancers, musicians, actors, whatever. People who are artists like that, they take everything and they bring it in and they hold it in, and they're always measuring the world around them to that, waiting tables in college or whatever. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I thought, sure, I've been to a lot of concerts, and I thought some of them were good and some of them not so good. And I've been to some festivals that I thought were run well and some that I thought needed a little help. I've got some ideas. I can do this. And we did it for 5 years, and it grew from 2 concerts to 2 weeks of concerts, and a side-by-side component where young students got to be side-by-side with professional musicians for a full week of one-on-one, 24/7. I'm pleased to say that I know of at least 5 of those young musicians who now have professional lives. And those professional lives are like the kind of professional life that you talk about. None of them are in symphonies. They've taken their classical training and they've moved out and done something else with it.
That's so cool.
It is very cool. And I keep on getting notes from them saying, "I'm doing this now, I'm doing that now." And I think that's great.
That's so great. And I just want to interject really fast, because what I love about how you describe the art walk and the festival is how at first there was just a handful of concerts or a handful of artists, and it gradually grew. And I think a lot of times when we're building something, we want it to be the thing it is in 5 years, the first year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that I started little, because I think if I had started big, wouldn't have happened, Right. But boy, you learn a lot. And I have a deep appreciation for people who pull off festivals, and people who run symphonies, and people who, have chamber groups, and it's a whole different world. And one of the things I learned is that the music can be great, but the money has to be there. And the money, and that's what A Musical Affair centered on, was really what I learned about how do you get the money. It's the money that matters. And, if you can get the money, you can make the music. You can find great music, but you got to have the money to pay for the great music.
Yes.
And you've got to have the right, you've got to be able to pay for an auditorium that projects the music in the right way. And you have to feed the musicians so that they're not starving musicians. And you have to make a situation that is agreeable, because you don't want, it's just a whole thing. It's much bigger than I ever imagined, and it turned into a year-round job. And for 5 years, I did almost no writing of my own, because there weren't enough hours in the day.
Wow.
And getting the money, it took me the full year each time to make the money, to make the festival happen.
Wow. And I have to say, that's what I loved about reading the book, because one of the biggest realizations I had, because I honestly, I don't think they really explain this in music school. Where does the money come from? Who does the money come from? Who are these people? And so you get a job that's what happened to me. I got a job in an orchestra right out of grad school. And I found out that the orchestra was struggling. I didn't find this out before I took the job. I found it out after I already moved across the country. And then you find out, so it's depending on donations. It's depending on people's goodwill. It's depending on their willingness to give their hard-earned money from their business or whatever in order to support musicians. And why would they do that? I have no idea. I was just kind of baffled about that. And so in the book, it shows you, who has money to give to things like this? Rich people, right? And so that's kind of where the drama and the fun story comes in the book.
And, I think for me, one of the most wonderful lessons of trying to raise the money, which was very hard, was when somebody gives you $25, they do it because they really love what you're doing, and that's what they can give. Mm-hmm. And, when somebody gives you 50, anything under $100, that's a precious amount of money, because those are the people who love it for what it is and want it in their lives. And they're passionate. They have the same kind of passion about that music that the person on stage tuning up has. But when you get into people who are giving $1,000 or $5,000, that's a whole different person. That's a whole different situation. I had one of the most telling things was I had someone call me who was a major donor for a lot of things in Raleigh, not just the arts, but just, a big name major donor, call me one afternoon and say, so on your program, how are you designating the various levels of the donors? What's the levels? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, what's if somebody gives $50, where are they going to be listed? Are they going to be listed in the program? How about if they give this? And how do what's the top tier? Well, I hadn't even thought about I was so drowning at that point. It was like the program, I'm going to, the levels of donators, it's like, blah, So
she wanted to know if she was like a gold or a platinum
exactly.
level.
I didn't even know what the gold or platinum level. So I made it up. And I said, well, in order to get into this, you'll have to give blah, blah, blah. And she wrote me a check for $1 more than that because she wanted to be in that group.
Interesting. Only $1.
Yeah, $1 more, $1 more to get into that group. He didn't want to be in the group below. So
right, because it clearly does do like, 20,000 right. to 100,000, and then like
exactly. Right. And then it's like 15,000 to 20,000, but she wanted to be in that top group. So so that was I think the spark that lit this book for me was really? That issue of, who are these donors and why does somebody give money? And then, of course, my wicked mind, I thought, well, somebody would give a lot of money if they were cheating on their wives. And so that's where the whole kind of affair thing started with the book, like who's trying to do whatever,
who's trying to get rid of money, who's trying to hide money, who's trying to hide, exactly, who's being blackmailed.
Exactly. So, it's just, so that really caught my attention, and it made me really rethink and also deeply appreciate that every $25 check that came in, I said, thank you, because I understood what that I've written those $25 checks. I'm now in a position where I can write those $100 checks. Right. But, earlier on in my career, I could write that $25 check.
Right.
And to know what I know about that money, how that money is gotten, that every $25 check was to me a goal. That really meant a lot to me. That meant I had somebody who really wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And somebody who was going to love it. And so that's why the book starts with a free concert with people who couldn't afford to be in the best concert. And so the orchestra does a free concert. And, so that's why it started with the free concert. And then it became the intrigue of, all that money, where's the money? And that is become so important. And so there are little truths throughout the book, but it's all fiction and fun. My publisher, who I just adore, Owl Canyon Press, Gene, he's just wonderful. And his partner, Keith, is a jazz musician. And, Gene and Keith called me up about a year ago, and we were in the process of publishing the book, and Keith said, I'm thinking about doing a little jazz festival. Can you talk me through this? So Keith and I, we talked through it, and then Keith and Gene reread my book again, and they said, oh, it really helped us sort of figure out how to run a festival. And Gene called me and he said, there's one character in the book which is Millie, the mother, and Binky, the Binky, the conduit to all the big cash. And Gene called me up and he said, I just love Millie and I love Binky. And I said, there needs to be more Binkies in the world, But, so the book grew out of just that struggle for the money, and also the underlying story of the young girl, Emily, whose life does get turned around by the music, and how music and art in general changes lives, which is really important to me. And I had to have Emily.
Yeah, that was a cool part.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a book that grew out of real experience. Yes, I ran a festival for 5 years. Would I do it again? Maybe. I don't know. It was a thrill. The music was fabulous. I still have people who stop me in Raleigh, who I don't know, who have seen me on stage introducing the festival and various things, come up to me and say, that was the best. That was just the best. Thank you.
That's so great.
It is great. It is.
Yeah. But, and, back to the book, like one thing that was fun for me, being someone who's lived in Raleigh for so long, like, oh, that's a real restaurant, and oh, that's a real cross intersection. And
Right.
I know, like, while I was reading it, I was actually picturing like, oh, that apartment would be like
Right there.
10 blocks from my house or whatever,
Well,
right?
Great sadness. I mean, I really like place a lot. And if I use a street name or a building name in any book, it's a real one, because I just feel that gives it a little meat. Well,
Yeah.
do you remember that coffee shop, the De los Muertes,
Yeah.
And I had written that in, and that's such a great name. It was such a great coffee shop. It was just so funky, and it was so perfect,
I
and
love
it
that
worked
spot.
perfectly with the book. And then it closed.
I
And,
know.
and it was in my last edits of the book that it closed. And I struggled with it for a couple weeks. Do I change, what do I do with it? Do I change coffee shops? But that location of that coffee shop, I needed that location. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to leave. It's a great name. I'm
Yeah.
going to leave it. And even though it's gone, old people from Raleigh will know that it was once there,
Yeah. And it was, because it was right down the block from where the
Right. Yeah. It was.
apartment, the condo was, right? So I know. And it was so fun to be able to picture that. And I'm sure the same goes for, I mean, that's why so many movies take place in New York, and because people are obsessed with New York. And so, like, just saying something's at this intersection or near, in this neighborhood or whatever, it gives people an opportunity to really picture it, which is what I was doing while I was reading the book.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. It was fun.
It was so fun. And so, like, let's talk a little bit about, so you just admitted that you would actually consider doing a music festival again. So is that the first
Yes,
time you?
I think about that. We had one that got turned down. And, it's not only that you have the work to do, you have to have a base, you have to have we had eventually the town of Carrie, which became our base. And that was too complicated to do in the book. So we just stayed in Raleigh in the book.
Yeah.
I just stayed in Raleigh. But eventually the town of Carrie stepped up and said, yes, we will be your base funder. So you need that. If you're going to grow, if you're going to survive, you need that chunk. You need that kind of legitimation. So, this is the town of Carrie is backing me. So therefore you can back me too. And, whatever.
Right.
So once you get something like that, it's not like you have smooth sailing. It's not like this money is just going to be thrown at you year after year.
Right.
You have to, that's a very important thing for artists and musicians to understand, is it's not like you have to reinvent yourself, but you have to clarify your voice. You have to clarify what you want to do. And you shouldn't make the mistake of saying, well, I'm just going to do the same thing we did last year. There needs to be, where's your growth? Where are you going? What's the next step? What's the next step? And so, with the last year that we had the festival, we had, 2 weeks, and we had introduced jazz, and we had brought in two very prominent jazz groups, one from the US and one from Europe. And we had a whole week where young people who were interested in, high school students who were interested in following, becoming jazz musicians or just touching their toes into it, what would that be like? So we had these two fabulous jazz groups for these young people to work with. And then we also had Neil worked with another group, Winged Victory for the Sullen. He still works with them. And Winged Victory has done, and Dustin particularly has done a lot of movie scores. And Neil now is doing a lot of movie work. And they had just finished doing Dustin had written the score for, and I can't remember the name, but anyways, and it was an important movie that got a lot of attention, and they were up for an Academy Award. So anyway, we had done all these things. We had done the classical thing. We had added the educational thing. We brought in some opera. We did this, we did that. So each year we were building on what we had done the year before. And that's what you have to do. If you're going to grow, if you're going to survive, you're always building on the next thing. So we went to the town of Carrie with a proposal, which I thought was dynamite, unbelievable. So Dustin and Adam, who are the Winged Victory for the Sullen that Neil works with, both of them are garage band people. They're not classically trained musicians. They're garage band guys. That's who they are. And here they're doing this incredible stuff, and all this movie scoring stuff. And then Johan Johansson did movie scores, and we had these resources that I just couldn't believe were in our hands. So our proposal was, okay, we're going to do the classical thing, we're going to do this jazz component, and then we're going to have a partial week where we bring in Dustin and Adam, and we're going to have a symposium about writing music for movies. And we're going to do a movie festival. We've got 5 movies that they're involved in. And we're going to show the movies at this movie theater. And we're going to have them talk about the movies. And we're going to also have them do a thing about garage band guys. And, wouldn't that be fabulous? And they turned it down.
What?
Yes. They turned it down. I couldn't believe it. My jaw dropped. I went, wait a minute. So you just opened a movie theater? Let's see if we can go over this again. Let me tell you what I'm doing here, And so that was it. That was our last festival.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Can you imagine that? I mean, imagine we would have had Dustin and Anne. We would have had Winged Victory for the Sullen to come from Europe. We would have had these 2 garage band guys who are making more money than they know what to do with. And Neil, who plays with them, who turned their music into actual written music. And the Echo Collective is their band now. And we would have had them. We would have had Neil and Echo Collective. And, Adam and Dustin, we would have had.
Would Johan Johansson have been there?
He wouldn't have been there, no, because Johan came a little later after that. But
okay.
Neil was just starting to work with Johan. Mm-hmm. But it's like, oh my gosh, and you'd have a music component for kids who are disenfranchised out of the music world,
right?
And we would have given them street cred. And we would have given them an opportunity to work with professionals who came from a garage.
See, and that's one of the things that drives me crazy about music education is that it's so focused on classical.
Yeah. That
it's not legit if it's not classical. And so it's not taken seriously. It's not given scholarships to, none of that. And so, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's a totally bad thing, because if you look at musicians as a whole, I would say the people who are much more entrepreneurial and driven to create, to build an audience and do all those things, those are the garage band type people who haven't. So in that way, on one hand, it's not fair. On the other hand, it probably serves them better. So, right. But I would have loved to see that, because acknowledging kids who are into music, but don't want to sit in a practice room with a clarinet or a violin or something like that, or a piano. Like they want to play the guitar, they want to play the drums, they want to see other ways that you can make an income and make art if you're not a classically trained musician. So that's pretty genius. Plus it includes other artistic ventures like movies and then making music for movies.
Yeah, and I also think, I was just heartbroken because we had this proposal, and, to come up with a proposal like that, it's not like you sit down and have a beer and, write it on a napkin and then say, whammo zammo. It's not, you
worked hard on it.
Right. And, you have to make that's the other thing that artists sometimes don't understand, that it's not like you just kind of say, I got this idea and why don't we do that, Because the people holding the money are saying, show us your idea. Who's your audience? How are you going to build this? And you have to know how to communicate that. I mean, you have to know how to build that out. You can't just say, yeah, you know, you ought to give me $30,000 because I got this really cool idea and you're going to love it, you know? But the other thing is, you know, I could have seen that festival, then moving from there to studio musicians. What is a studio musician? You know, what if we had a symposium for kids to understand what happens, you know, what it means to be a studio musician, what it means to work from a click track, you know, what it means to, you know, like do what I told you, you know, the Echo Collective did in order to make it sound like it was a larger audience. You know, it's like, what does that life entail? You know, what is a day in a studio like? What is it, you know, and there are a lot of people who make a living as a studio musician, and they're fabulous musicians, and they are unsung. They never get to stand up and get the applause at the end of it. It's a job, but it's a job they love with a passion. And, you know, it's like, how do you bottle that passion, and how do you recognize? And we have to start giving recognition to that kind of passion, you know. And I think that's very hard. And so anyway, that's a little bit what the book is about. And I do have on occasion, you know, work with people to say, this is what you need to do. You want to do this? This is what you need to do. I think you and I had that conversation one time, you know.
Definitely.
This is
no,
what
and they're very helpful. I mean, I'm thinking, you know, you could probably impact the music festival space without actually running your own by being a mentor to the people that decide to do it. You could help them, and then that's their work to do. Right. And it would probably be invaluable to them to have you on their side as a coach and mentor. And, you know, I mean, going forward, you said you just wrote an article, what's your plan, or got plans for after COVID, life after COVID. And I would venture out to say that maybe life after COVID means people kicking it into high gear and saying, well, am I going to wait for that person to figure out like that institution to figure out all the logistics of how this is going to work inside of the kind of space that we've already created? Like we do operas inside this building on this stage, versus like, what does it look like? Can we get more back to normal if we hold outdoor concerts? Like, we travel to Florida and it's outside and it's warm enough, or, you know, it's only in the summer, or whatever works to make it so that people can start to feel comfortable doing a live situation again. And maybe it's going to be much easier for someone to create a new than to try to take an existing model that's been, you know, kind of trapped by this current world situation and try to rework that to make the old things still work now, versus let's do another thing that's going to work with today's world, you know, essentially. So I think maybe creating a music festival or an art festival of some other kind could be the wave of the future.
Right. Well, I think that anybody who wants to do a music festival absolutely should buy my book. You know?
Yes, because that's the real, it does give you a window, even though it's fiction, the reality of the drama that can happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It probably does, because whenever there's people and money and an art and a project, there's always going to be drama.
There is drama, and you have to be prepared for that. And you have to be able to, there has to be a plan. Forget the plan B. You got to have a plan D and E, you know. It's, you know, during one of the festivals, Eric Woodall, who now is a very good friend of mine, who is the artistic director of North Carolina Theater, and we figured out that he's the one who did this. We had secured the Fletcher Theater for, you know, the festival, which was a perfect size venue for what we were doing. And 2 weeks, let me just point this out, 2 weeks before we're supposed to be in there, tickets are sold, programs are done, posters are out. I get a call from Memorial Auditorium. I think it was Memorial Auditorium at that time, saying, you know, I'm sorry, but your contract is null and void because one of our regular, you know, contractors needs that space. And so it's no longer available to you.
What?
Yeah. So I had a little bit more than 2 weeks to find another place. And we did a series of concerts at Marble's Kids Museum in that big hallway, because that was the only space I could come up with. And it turns out that it was Eric Woodall bringing in a musical at the last minute, and he took the space. And I said, Eric, the fact that we're friends is really a testimony to how kind I am to you. But it was just, we were having coffee one morning and talking about, a project that we were working on. And all of a sudden, I kind of put two and two together, and I told him the story, and he kind of got quiet, and he went, because he was talking about this kind of last minute musical thing that he did and how they moved it to Fletcher. And I just sat there, and he kind of looked at me, and I said, let me tell you the other side of that story. He said, oh my God, that was me. And I said, yes, it was, wasn't it?
Did he know that they would just, did the theater just
realize
say,
it.
Okay.
Because he was, North Carolina Theater, they were a regular, they were one of the quote unquote resident artistic groups of that building. And they needed the theater. And so a resident artistic, talk about, your freelancer. Well, I was like a freelance festival.
Yeah.
So I was, I was in fly by nighter or whatever. In terms, I wasn't a resident. That whole issue of, do you have a position? Are you, and people need to understand, getting out of the box is getting alive. But getting out of the box is not easy, because you're out of the box, you're out of the mainstream. And so you're a little bit bucking the mainstream as you go. And that was a true moment where, I thought, I can't even believe that this is happening. And I think who did I grab? Chris, the violist and I grabbed him, and I said, I need you. I called him up, and I said, Chris, I need you to just travel around the city with me. And I said, and we went from little auditorium to little auditorium to little auditorium all over the city. And I had him stand on the stage and play and tell me what he thought about the sound. And, our best choice was Marbles.
Wow.
Because most of the small auditoriums, here's a little point that you don't think of. So if you have an auditorium that is primarily for speakers or for movies, the floor is carpeted.
Right.
And the chairs are thicker, and they absorb sound. So they're dead. So you can't run I learned a lot of technical things that I perhaps could have lived a long time without, but I know a lot about spaces now. But yeah, I took Chris with me all over and said, just play a few notes for me,
Wow.
just help me find a space. And I had Neil on the phone, holding the phone up so he could hear, because he was in Europe, so no, it's hard, but it is funny. I can laugh about it now. I was so exhausted by the end of it. But, then I often think about that festival that was turned down, and how that would have been so powerful for those kids. And it would have been so powerful for the audience to kind of meet the people who make the music in their television shows,
Right.
And
because a lot of times that's a conduit for people falling in love with classical music, really.
Exactly.
I mean, I know of a story where actually I had this person on my podcast. It's Babatunde Akinbaboye, which I had to practice. I had to practice that last name for a few times. I even searched him to hear someone else say his name, and I could practice it over and over. But he kind of shot to fame in the opera world with a viral video that he did where he used to sing opera, or he does, but during this video, he was singing opera along with like a rap track. And he used like Figaro, and it was rap. And he just published it on Facebook, just kind of on a whim, because it's something he always did in his car. And he was like, I'm just going to throw this out there. And it went viral. Like it went so insane. Cool. And like 2 days later, he's getting a phone call from the Ellen show, like wanting to have him on the Ellen show. And like all these crazy things happened. And since that, he's been building his audience, creating albums. And he said it was such a great episode because he was talking just all the things about the opera world and how they wouldn't necessarily recognize him because what he was doing
Right.
wasn't in their box, right? And
Right. Oh, yeah.
so, but he's had numerous people say, I saw your video. And then because of that, I bought tickets to the opera because I want to hear the original version without rap
that's
or without
fabulous.
like beats like that. So,
Yeah.
so it just goes to show you that when people get exposed to it, however what way they do, if it's through a movie or a viral video or whatever, they're going to go, well, hey, maybe I want to hear what the original sounds like, or what what does Beethoven sound like, or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I love the music that Neil and Echo are doing. You know, as Neil says, he said, it's really just classical music. It's classical music constructed. He said, we have these audiences of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. And he said, they don't know it's classical music. And he said, if that music gets in them, that rhythm gets in them, if they hear a little Bach, it's going to be a familiar kind of patterning. And
exactly.
I think that's very interesting. I was invited to write a play. I've written a couple small plays and about the 19th Amendment, about women getting the right to vote, and did a lot of research for it, and wrote this little play that Eric Woodall directed, which was great fun to work with him on that. And anyway, that has taken me to looking at the whole issue of women in the arts, women, the right to vote. It's not only the right to vote, it's the right to have a voice. And what does it mean to have a voice? And I'm reading all of these turn of the century things about women. And particularly my last book, The Inevitable Past, was set partially with the 1893 Columbia Exposition in Chicago. And there was a World Congress at the same time for women, for the suffragists. And there was also a women's pavilion. And I was doing some research about the Congress and this and that, and whatever. And I discovered that the young female architect who designed the women's pavilion for the Columbia Exposition, she was, I think, the third woman in the United States to ever graduate from an architectural school. She was the first woman to ever get a commission for a major public building. That was the only building she ever designed and created. And right after the exposition, she left the exposition, she got married, and she had children, and she never made another building.
Wow. And
that fascinates me because I want to say, whoa, wait a minute. You had something to build on here. Mm-hmm. And I think we let go of that opportunity to build. And for a lot of reasons. I'm not saying that she did anything wrong or that she shouldn't have gotten married or that she shouldn't have had children, and she probably, had a good life. But, from my vantage point and, just from working with all the people I've worked with over the years, it's easy to not stay on track to build. It's easy to let something go, to say, well, that was really hard. I don't want to do that again. And I think that when you find the people who are willing to do the hard stuff, good things happen. Mm-hmm. I got off the track a little with that, but, that's okay.
That's okay. So your book is coming out when?
May 15th.
Okay.
A musical affair, and it's published by Owl Canyon Press. You can find it through Owl Canyon Press. You can find it through my website, cjanework.com, and or you can find it on Amazon. Evil Amazon. What can I say? And that's a whole nother issue. Is big box versus small box. And, it breaks my heart to see the small businesses that have folded because they just couldn't manage. They didn't have the underpinnings to stay afloat,
I know.
We need to find those brave souls who want to open that restaurant, who want to build a small theater, who want to do, there's an artistic life in all kinds of things. There's an artistic life in making a great omelet, and we need to.
Right.
There's an artistic life in actually fixing the plumbing in our old house. That would be great,
Right.
But yeah.
So, and the book might be a movie, right? Or we're kind
of. No. Well, I'd love for the book to be a movie. Let's make the book a movie. Eric and I are working together. Eric Woodall, who is the director, artistic director of the North Carolina Theater. He is also, he's also a casting agent. Uh-huh. And so he and I were talking one day, and he also read the book to write a blurb. And he says to me, this is really a movie. He said, this is just a really juicy movie. And so we came up with this crazy idea where we would, like fantasy football, the people pour over fantasy football. Yeah. So we're going to run a fantasy casting for this book. And we've selected 3 actors for each of the main characters in the book. And we're going to release the names of those actors that we've picked in a brief outline of the character so you can think about it. And we're hoping people will buy the book and think of the book as a movie and play this game with us. And each week we're going to release another character and another opportunity to vote, as to your choice. Be a casting director. Eric's going to write a piece about what a casting director does. That's been fun for me because, you just think the casting director says, I pick you, and, there's a whole science behind that I didn't quite understand before. And I understand a little bit better. And then my publisher, at the end of all of it, my publisher is going to send a book to each of the actors who won in the fantasy casting and say, FYI, you have been cast in a fantasy movie. Would you like to read the book? And just to see if anybody bites on it. And, it was just seemed like a fun thing to do. Again, a way to get out of the box and be in a different place in terms of promotion. That's a whole podcast. It's not only you build the festival, but you have to promote the festival. Mm-hmm. And how do you promote the festival? How do you get the word out? How do you get people to buy the ticket? How do you get people to show up? How do you get people to give you money? How do you
Exactly. And that's that's this phase you're in right now with the book, and you're promoting it by being on this podcast, by running this competition or this like little contest of the fantasy movie. Cause I mean, already I want to reread the book and see like which actors I think would be good for I remember the book of course, but it's been a few months now. So I want to revisit it and think like, oh yeah, I would love to see that person in that role. Right. And where is that contest going to take place? Will it be on your website or?
It'll be on the website. It'll be introduced through Facebook and Twitter, and it'll lead you. There were technical issues with having 3 to choose from. And we decided that we really wanted to have 3 actors to choose from because we wanted to choose somebody who was kind of well-known in the public, like people would say, oh yeah, that would be a good person. And we wanted to also give space for up-and-coming actors who are just beginning their career. And we thought, why not give them, why not? You build a big tent. No matter what you do, you build the biggest tent that you've got the material to build. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to introduce people to some actors who are not quite as largely known. Even though I don't know these actors, I'd like to promote their work, whatever. So we're going to have links so that somebody can find out who those actors are and the movies that they're in, and they could maybe watch those movies. And wouldn't you like to find a new movie to watch on Netflix right now? Something fresh. And then, so, it'll be each week it'll be introduced on my Facebook feed and also on my Twitter feed. And then it'll lead you to my website. And then you cast your vote on my website. And so, it'll be an easy click. It won't be complicated. I don't do complicated when it comes to all this stuff. So it'll be an easy click. And then we'll go from there. And, you'll know a little bit. The write-ups that I did for Eric are the same kind of write-ups that they would do if they were doing this as a real casting situation. So it's also an opportunity to have kind of like a little backstage education. And, how did so-and-so get picked? And, how did this happen? Why? What's the match here?
And then, of course, if there's a movie, Carrie, there needs to be. Oh, sorry, we froze up a little bit.
Oh,
if there's a movie, there has to be music, and
there
so
has to be music. That's right. And I did a fun thing. I don't know, if you got the version with the fun thing in it. I decided, speaking of that since the book is about a festival, that I created in the back of the book, I created a festival program, and put ads in it, and also gave a breakdown of the music that was played that's mentioned in the book. And so anybody who reads the book could then, if they wanted to, they have all the reference points to listen to the music that's referred to in the book.
Right.
So,
and I think Crushing Classical got an ad in there too.
You did get an ad in there. It's great. But my publisher at first was like, "You want a what?" And I said, "It'll be fine. It'll be easy." And the designer kind of went, "Tell me how this is going to work." I said, "It's just going to be part of the book." And you're just going to.
It's great. It's like a visual aid, like as if you went to the concert yourself.
Exactly. And so now you can attend the concert that's the week of concerts that's talked about in the book. Yeah. I only did 1 week. I couldn't have done, the book would have been much, much bigger if we had gone 2 weeks, and there would have been blood on the tables, I'm sure, by then, But
I can't wait for people to read this book. I'm so excited about it because I enjoyed it so thoroughly. And this podcast is going to come out right when the book releases.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, it's really fun. And it's, as you said, it's not like any other book that I've written. Yeah. It's more of I guess, it's a romp with a serious underpinning. And I'm serious. I mean, if somebody really wants to take on running a festival, or if somebody has run a festival, they would completely understand this book. They would, laugh out loud for most of it.
There are some laugh out loud moments, definitely. I'm going to link up all the ways to check out this book and buy the book in the show notes, plus your website and links to your other books, because more than likely, after somebody reads this book, they're going to want to check out your other work too.
Oh, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for being on today, Carrie. This has been so much fun.
Well, thank you. And, I love what you're doing. I think it's wonderful. You're building something as well, and that's terrific. Your podcasts are like a small festival.
Thank you so much, Carrie.